Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here this evening to take part in our bullying prevention update for Greene County Schools. Just to introduce myself, my name is Brian Huber. I'm the Assistant Superintendent here in the school division, and I'm certainly pleased to be able to provide information to you this evening on this very important topic, while also allowing you to hear from some of our professionals across the school division who work with our students and staff each day on these very issues that we'll discuss this evening. So again, thank you for being here. The first part of our presentation is a slide presentation with some very specific topics that myself and Dr. Purcell will present, and then we'll bring our panel members up here for the panel component. Just to recap our agenda for this evening, some of the topics we want to discuss and want to provide information on. First is to make sure that we have a good definition of bullying that is consistent across the division. We'll provide that for you so you have that information. We'll talk about the very important topic of cyberbullying and how that has changed over the past few years and the impact that that has on schools. We'll look at some statistics from across the nation, introduce our new Stop It app, discuss our division process, while also highlighting the events that we will have in the month of October for Bullying Awareness Month that's being recognized throughout the United States. Just to highlight real quick, this topic is one of importance, not just because of the prevalence of the issue across America, but also because it's part of our strategic plan, Innovate 2021. Part of that plan is to ensure that we have safe and supportive learning environments for both our students and staff. And looking even more closely into that objective, we talk about developing our comprehensive programs that address social issues, with anti-bullying being one of those issues. So this is an important issue for us as a division. It's something that we give a great amount of attention to on a yearly basis, and we hope that the information we share this evening is beneficial to you. So first, the first thing that's really important as we talk about this topic, which is a very sensitive topic, is to actually define what constitutes bullying. This is an important topic because often there are misconceptions, both in public but also in the school's eyes, of what is bullying and what is conflict. So for us in Greene County Schools, this is our definition of bullying, and this is not developed by me or by Dr. Purcell or by any of our school principals. This is actually in our regulations and stated within our policy manual. And you can see two words that I've highlighted here very specifically. The first is systematically, and the second is chronically. These are two important words when we think about the concept of bullying and conflict among students. And that bullying is not a one-time encounter or a one single incident. It is a systematic and chronic incident that happens repetitively over time. You can see that there's 5 different categories that we've identified that consist of bullying, and those again are listed in our regulations. So back again to the concept of conflict versus bullying. You can see this chart that does a nice job describing this for us. This chart is provided by the PACER organization, which is a great resource for us as a school division as we collect and utilize anti-bullying resources, and this is one of them. And you can see the 2 definitions provided. Conflict is being a disagreement or argument, something that is a natural part of the social life of any student, of any adult. There are going to be conflicts. There are going to be times when you disagree with another person. That disagreement or conflict does not necessarily mean we have a bullying issue on our hands. Secondly, is an important concept about power. When we think about bullying, we often have an imbalance of power. So whether that's age, social status, size, stature, it could be a number of things. But when we look at bullying, we have to have an imbalance of power. And lastly, looking at conflict, when we talk about conflict, conflict is something that stops. It's not repeated over time, it's not repetitive, and typically we're able to help students move past that, whether it's through restorative practices or group counseling of them, and then we move on. Next is the important topic of cyberbullying, and we decided to include this in our presentation this evening because this is what makes bullying such a harmful thing for our youth to deal with today. Prior to the age of cell phones and email and chat rooms, students could kind of escape the conflicts or the social issues that might be present with them at school. And unfortunately, that's no longer the case. And that's what makes cyberbullying such a difficult thing for us as a school division to deal with, and a difficult thing for parents to deal with. I will tell you, for this specific topic, as you leave this evening, there's 2 stacks of paper in the rear of the auditorium, and there's just some helpful tips for you as parents if you have a child that's experiencing any effects from cyberbullying. And it also helps give you some conversation starters to help you have some dialogue with your child, which we know is important to make sure that they're communicating with you. But looking at the definition of cyberbullying, again, right from our PACER resource, cyberbullying is defined as the following: when we have electronic form of contact, which nowadays can be a number of things, whether it's texting or a social media app or email, a chat room, there's multiple forms of that electronic contact. It's typically an aggressive act. There's an intent. There's an intent to defame or embarrass or humiliate the other individual involved. Again, just as in our definition of bullying, it's a repetitive act that happens repetitively over time, and there's certainly emotional harm to the target. Why is it important that as parents and educators we talk to children about cyberbullying? And these are some of the reasons why we feel like, and the research shows, that it's an important discussion to have. First, we want students to understand that and recognize when behaviors are inappropriate. So if they're engaged in a discussion with somebody in an online format, we want them to be able to know when that discussion is not a healthy one and when they should report it to somebody. We want them to understand their rights. We want them to trust that by talking to us as educators or as parents about it, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to limit or remove their access to those social media or electronic forms. We want to know about it. We want students to know that there's ways to prevent cyberbullying from happening and give them the tools to do so. And certainly we want them to be confident if they handle another situation in the future. So just some tips and tricks for parents. Certainly we want to make sure that kids understand they need to be respectful when they're communicating, whether it's through social media or using their cell phone. There are tools available to you as parents to help limit your child's access. Depending upon your cell phone carrier and phone style, you can set up filters and limits and alerts and notifications, and so we strongly suggest that that's something that you look into. We also suggest that your child knows that you're doing that. That's more likely if they know that you are checking their phone or limiting their access, they're more likely to fall under the guidelines that you've set as a family for using those tools. Number 4 is an incredibly important one that I can't stress enough, that often goes unnoticed and really not adhered to with students, especially young people, and we've seen this more and more and more, is that students just don't understand that everything that they're putting out in an electronic form is leaving a digital footprint. That digital footprint can be damaging to themselves or others. It can be damaging to future careers or educational opportunities that they might want to take advantage of, and in some cases it can be against the law. And so we really want to make sure that parents are engaging in dialogue with students about that digital footprint and making sure that that footprint is a positive one and sheds a positive light on the child and won't harm them going down the road. We want to make sure that our students and our teens know that if they're being harassed, that they need to take steps to stop it, that it's not okay. So we want to have those conversations. And again, we want to make sure we're looking at privacy settings on their accounts and apps and making sure that we have access to those as parents to make sure we're monitoring that information. Just some statistics and facts. We could go on and on and on this evening about the statistics and facts around this issue, but I did want to share some that I thought were very important. 1 out of every 5 students across the nation reports that they've been a victim of bullying. More than half of bullying situations stop when a peer intervenes. You're going to hear our panel tonight talk about being upstanders. That's a term that we've begun to use in Greene County to help students understand that if they stand up for each other, more often than not, they can prevent the incident from going forward. And that school-based bullying prevention programs decrease bullying by up to 25%. That's one of the reasons we're here tonight, is to share the information with you about our programs, because we believe that we want to play an active role in helping to prevent bullying moving forward. Just from looking at some facts, students who engage in bullying behavior over a lifespan face a greater risk of committing a crime, which we believe is important to make sure kids know at an early age to not participate in that type of behavior. We know that although more than half of bullying situations stop when a peer intervenes, that only 20% of the time do peer bystanders actually step in. And so that's why we have the Upstanders program in place, and why we use that language when we talk with kids. Lastly, looking at research around student perceptions, unfortunately many students feel that not just teachers or not just school administrators, but the adults in their lives don't necessarily care or take it seriously when they report incidents of bullying. At this time, I'm going to turn over the podium to Dr. Purcell, who's going to highlight processes and procedures in place in the division, as well as give you information on a new app that we've adopted this year to help in our efforts to prevent bullying in schools.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. So on this slide, we're talking about the division process for when bullying is reported to our administrators or to our counselors. So the first part of that process is going to be to do an investigation. However that information comes to those administrators or those counselors, they're going to work on that investigation. They're going to notify parents and guardians, talk to students. As they're concluding an investigation, as they go through all the, and I'm going to talk more in depth on some of that as we go through, they're going to develop and file a report. And that can be done in a few different ways. As you're going to hear coming through, the Stop It app actually allows us to file that report as we go through. They're going to assign age-appropriate consequences, which I'm going to provide a list of different things, of different ways that we address issues of bullying throughout the year within our different buildings. There could be monitoring through our school intervention team. So if a student, it's a repetitive behavior for a student, for us to have our school interventions teams work with that student if he or she is exhibiting bullying behavior, or if on the other side a student is experiencing the effects of being bullied, how we can help those students and how we can help that through that. And then we're going to continue to follow up with those victims and with the accused. Again, if it's a victim and somebody has had repetitive bullying happen to them, we want to make sure that we are taking care of them and making sure that they're doing okay. And then for the students who you're going to see the word perpetrators or accused as throughout, making sure that we're addressing that issue to make sure that they don't continue to repeat that behavior and they can feel and understand the effects that they have on students throughout their school. So I'm going to start with the Stop It investigation piece. And so Stop It is a new app that has been we've been using this year, and I'm going to show some statistics as we go through here. And so that incident, a student reports it on the Stop It app or on the web browsing part of the Stop It program. That incident is immediately investigated. They get information from students, and each school can customize some things within their app so that how information comes. It is anonymous. Students can choose to provide as much or as little information, and schools can choose to add other questions to it. So on the report feature, students can they can type up a report if they needed to, but they can also add videos or pictures to that. And then the messenger side of the Stop It program or the Stop It app is simply like texting. And so they can send a quick text that goes to, depending on the school, all administrators and counselors in that school. So they all see it. And then that's when that investigation starts. Who, what, when, where, Were there witnesses? Who's the target? Because a lot of times what we're seeing is that students will report bullying behavior, even if it's not even towards them, they see it happen in the hallways. They see someone in the hall be bullied by somebody else. This app allows them to provide us that information anonymously without being called a snitch, or without others accusing them of tattletaling on them. And so it provides that feature, which is, it's nice, and it allows then administrators or counselors to go into that investigation, figure out who the witnesses are, if there were any, the targets, and then perpetrators, it's the word they use within the Stop It app, so who's being accused of that incident. And so they can work through all that. And again, age-appropriate action will be taken with those incidents, as well as then communication with parents. And so then, again, depending on who took the action, and what the following slide will show that, will be who communicates and how that action is recorded within the Stop It app. This actually is going to be a short video on the Stop It app, and it's about a 2 or 3 minute video that can be shown. And if you go to their website, there's a much longer video, but it's 14, 15 minutes long. Okay. So this shows what it looks like when it comes to counselors and administrators as that Stop It app comes in. And so this is an actual one where I've blacked out different information on it. And so you can see it's the date, the organization, which is one of the schools, and then the source, what the message is. So this student took time to write a significant amount on that piece. And then name and description of the accused student, location of where it took place. The more information we can get, you'll see as you see some of the reports later on in this presentation, the better we can do as being vigilant in our buildings and keeping an eye on specific areas. I know the administrators and counselors in this room right now have a great idea of where the hotspots are within our buildings, but it's always good to be able to put that data together and make those links. And so it could be who the victim is, the date of the incident, were you around, and who's reporting it. Then this is what the sample report would be. When they're finished, that administrator or that counselor would go through, the status could be pending, meaning we're still looking into the investigation. The incident type, was it bullying, was it harassment, was it a fight? Because the Stop It app is not just about bullying, and so they can put that piece on there. Where did it happen? When did it happen? Specifically on a time, do we know that it happened at lunch, during a class change? That's helpful. Up in the top right, assign to, that's when we can select, okay, we're going to assign it to a specific counselor or to a specific administrator for them to finish up. Incident tags, that's locations, classroom, hallways, bathrooms, cafeteria, gym, locker room. Again, the more information we can gather in that situation, the better we can be in the long run. Targets, that's where we're putting who was being bullied at that point. Perpetrators, is it one student? Is it multiple students? By putting that information there, we can also continue to look at the data and see if the student, that alleged perpetrator, is it happening more than one time? Okay, the student who's filing this is anonymous. This information, though, we can kind of sort through. Not sure if that's going to show, not from that direction. We can sort through that. And then there's action taken. And the next slide is going to show some possible examples of action taken. Is it suspension? Is it in-school suspension? Detentions, lunch detentions? Is it a counseling session? Peer mediation type pieces? And so that just helps us collect that information. If someone doesn't report it on a Stop It app, the investigation looks very similar. And for some of our schools right now, some of our schools are going in and using that Stop It app even as a student comes to them in person in that investigation, because again, it puts all that information into that one location. But the investigation remains the same, even if they do not enter it into the Stop It app. They got to figure out the who, what, when, where, who are the witnesses, who are the targets, the perpetrators, and go through that process to determine what is taking place there. But a lot of your schools are going through, regardless if it comes through on the Stop It app or not, they can go in and they can fill that in themselves when a student comes to their office and sits with them individually. These are some examples, not an exhaustive list, not in any order, in regards to what would happen with different incidents. Counseling. Sometimes we just need to be able to talk to our students about what took place. Was it bullying? Was it harassment? Was it someone just being mean to another person and having that conversation with them? Restorative practices, working with students on that. Lunch detentions, after school, in school, out of school suspensions, social probation, and then parent-student meetings. All of these, it's not an exhaustive list, but it can be a list of different examples that our administrators and or counselors would be taking when students, when going through the anti-bullying process. This is another example. I blacked out the organization, but if a student was assigned in-school suspension for acts, you can see the incidents are closed, and then it lists the type. Was it harassment? Was it bullying, physical bullying, or a threat or intimidation? And so this is just a sample of how you can break some different things down within that Stop It app. Total incidents. Right before this meeting, I believe it was 184 incidents within the Stop It app. Please understand, the initial purchase for this, for us getting this, for us to be able to work with it, for me to be able to get stuff downloaded, started in March. That March through was playing. March through like August was us working through different things, testing it, me sending, creating things so our administrators could see it and see what was happening as we're going through. Then you see the spike, obviously, in August. We were in school for, 10 days in August, roughly, and then September, and it's going up. Not all of those are bullying incidents, all right? For instance, one school, just talking through today, going through the number of incidences they've had in that building, the credible threats was probably less than 10, or credible incidents. Kids are going to be kids. There's going to be some things that are going to be reported that are going to be false or just silly, as far as them having to, trying to get us going. But a lot of it has been fantastic information, has really helped our administration and our counselors be able to help our student body. This is a different breakdown. So you've got, of that, I think when I did this, it was about 168, 170. It breaks it down by percentages. You can then click on each one of those bars and it breaks it down even further, whether it's according to building. This is countywide. This is not individual school. And so again, we can add or subtract comments or things from that. If we find that something is being reported that we need to, or that's not there, we can add to that list. Incident tags, again, we can add to this, so you can see classrooms, hallways are always a big deal, and especially our middle and high schools, those transition times, the less structured times of their days. Cafeterias are always going to be a big one as well. So it gives you a breakdown of where things tend to be happening. At this point, I'm going to pass it back off to Mr. Huber to wrap up this part of the presentation before we get into our panel discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Purcell, for that overview, talking about the division process and certainly highlighting our newest initiative this year, which has been the Stop It app. I think one of the powerful things, as you probably saw, is the app allows us to respond in a much more efficient manner when incidents are occurring. Prior to, we often saw that students didn't want to stand out or didn't want to leave class to go to the office, or didn't want their peers to know that they were really going to go and tell on somebody that did something in the hallway. And this allows us to get that information immediately. And I know one of the things we've noticed is that our counselors and our admins have a much quicker reaction time to those things. And also, as Mr. Purcell noted, it gives us some information so we can be proactive as we move forward. Just to close this portion of the presentation, I just want to talk about some of the activities that are going on this month. As I mentioned when we started, this is Bullying Awareness Month across the nation. And so we just have a sample here for you of some of the things that are occurring in the division. For instance, we just had a Mix It Up at Lunch Day at the middle school, where we try to encourage students to meet new people and get out of their comfort zones and out of their cliques to make new friends and to have them mix it up at lunch. You can also see that we have advisory lessons going on. You'll hear a little bit more about that from our counselors. Those are some of the proactive measures that we're putting in place, classroom lessons, and then across the division on October 24th, we will be recognizing Unity Day by wearing orange in most of our schools and offices. So again, we hope that you found that information to be valuable, to give you some insight into some of the things that are happening in the division, as well as give you some more detail on the Stop It app. We will continue to promote the use of that app with students, parents, moving forward. And then now we'd like to go ahead and bring up our panel, who is a group of educators, counselors, administrators from across the division to respond to questions that were posed through the online survey that was sent out a couple of weeks ago. So panel, if you could go ahead and come on up. First thing we want to do is we want to make sure that everybody's aware of our panel members, who they are, their role in our division. So panel members, I'm going to ask that we just kind of go down the line and let folks know who you are and your role in the school division here.
Kyle Purcell, Director of Administrative Services.
Katie Brunell, Principal at William Monroe High School.
Adam Maddox, Principal at Nathaniel Greene Elementary School.
Donna Payne, Principal at Ruckersville Elementary School. Eileen Oliver Eggert, Principal at William Monroe Middle School. Jessica Ayers, I'm the school counselor at the primary school. Taylor Snowden, I'm one of the school counselors at the high school. And Kristen Turner, I am one of the school counselors at the middle school.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here this evening to join us. We do have microphones on the table, so when I direct the specific questions to you, I'll ask that you use the mic so make sure everybody can hear. Just so the audience is aware, the way that we developed these questions for our panel is by sending out a survey to get different topics and categories that people wanted to hear about. And we did our very best to try to classify those into specific topics and then develop questions that help give people answers to some of the things they asked. As with any survey, some of the responses submitted were very individual in nature to a specific situation, which obviously is not appropriate for the entire group to address, but we certainly welcome if you do have those very specific questions. You can see me afterwards or certainly reach out to your school administrator or school counselors to discuss that. So the first topic and area of focus for us is to elaborate a little bit more on the investigation and process that Dr. Purcell alluded to during the slide presentation. So the first question here, I'm actually going to direct to Ms. Brunell, and that question is, what is the process that school goes through when receiving a complaint or information about a possible bullying situation between students?
Usually those come to an administrator first. Sometimes they go to the counseling office first, but usually it comes to the administrator, at which point we speak with all parties involved. We would start the investigation there. It may involve speaking with other students. It may involve using the cameras to look at footage as to what happened. And we usually bring in both parties that are involved in the situation and just try to discuss, what has happened and what goes on. From that point on, we often refer them to the counseling office for more specific opportunities to talk with each other and discuss what the problem at hand may be. Sometimes we also refer them, depending on the number of instances that this may have come up, to our student intervention team where we can look at specific times, places that this is occurring, and how we can deal with that as a building, as a whole building versus just a small entity.
Great. Ms. Payne, I'm going to ask that if you could just talk maybe from the elementary level, maybe what that process looks like, if it's any different for you all.
Looks very similar. We would definitely speak with all of the students involved. We would make sure that parents were notified and discuss with parents if their child has complained of anything at home, or if they've shared any additional information with them at home. And then also follow up with the students to make sure that the instance has stopped and increase supervision in the areas where it's happened.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Next question is going to be for you, Dr. Purcell. And this is specifically a question that I know came through on our survey as we analyzed it. It's in regards to student transportation and how that might be different. So if you could talk a little bit about how we handle reports of bullying on a school bus.
Sure. I think the first part for bullying on the school bus is we have to know about it. And that's probably one of the more difficult pieces, as we even alluded to earlier with the Stop It app. A lot of times you don't hear things all the time about what takes place. And so on a school bus, sometimes that's even more difficult for us to get that information. That information is often reported either to the school directly by students and or to the transportation office. Once that's reported, one of the first things we'll do is try to pull bus tape. The kids don't usually realize it, but there's 3 to 4 cameras on each bus, and often they have sound. And so if it's possible, we take a look at that and look into that situation. And then that investigative process looks very similar to what it does at the schools. So the transportation office will work with administration in regards to investigating that process and working through everything. The administrators will take the lead once we've been able to identify that a situation has taken place, but that investigation process looks similar once we know about it. That's probably the most difficult part, not only for students, but also for parents. So if there's a case out there, as parents out there, please let your students know that they can report anything from the bus to their administrator. They can report it to the bus driver if there is a bus aide on there. And then we've also, again, with the Stop It app, again, I know it's relative mostly for your older students, but we've had it both at the middle and high, but then also at the elementary. Students report things with that app. And so as a parent, if something were to happen and it's a younger student and they're not carrying a cell phone around, they, as parents and students, you can use the web application and report that through the web application. And so we maybe get it at 5 o'clock in the evening, but then that allows us the following morning to really get on that quickly. And so it's not waiting for time, because the earlier we can get to it, whether it's in a school or on a bus, the better off we are. And so there are different consequences or different things that we can take as far as making sure students are separated on the bus and having seat changes that way. So, but the biggest piece is getting that report to us so that we can do the investigation.
Great, thank you. The next area or topic of focus for us is to talk really about the proactive measures. And so we're going to have our school counselors weigh in on this a little bit. We talked about the Stop It app, and that's somewhat of a reactive tool that allows us to respond after something has happened. But there's a lot happening in the division to try to teach students about the harmful effects of bullying. So I'm going to direct this first question to Ms. Ayers, just from the elementary level. If you could talk about what steps are taken to help teach students about the harmful effects of bullying, and can you discuss the process of teaching students to be an upstander?
Sure, and it looks a little bit different at my school because I'm, kindergarten through 2nd grade. But really, we are focusing on teaching them what bullying is, teaching them the definition, but then we try to talk about the harmful effects. What impression does it leave on a student? Something that I do in 1st grade is called the wrinkled heart activity, and we cut out a heart, and then I have the class look at it, and then we talk about different examples of bullying. They give me examples of things that people may say that would be hurtful or things that they could do, and with every one I fold up the heart and we kind of watch the heart be crushed, and then we talk about things that we can do to make someone feel better and kind things that we can do and we can say, and with every one of those we unfold the heart. So at the end you have the heart is whole again, but you can see wrinkles, and you can see what has happened to it and how it's been changed, and that you can try to make things better, but you can't take it back. So that's something that really, I think, is impactful for them at that young age, where they can really see it in front of them. And talking about being an upstander, I really start to kind of bring that into focus in second grade. We talk about it at all levels, but at second grade is when we start to really talk about the different kinds of bullying and the difference that it makes for students to be an upstander, how important it is for them to be able to stand up for themselves and to stand up for their peers. Starting in kindergarten, we teach them a really easy method. We teach them the stop, walk, talk method. So they know to tell the bully to stop. If that doesn't work, they walk to find an adult, and we brainstorm adults, and then they talk and they tell the adult what's going on. So that's some of what we do at the younger levels.
Great. Okay, Ms. Snowden, can you just talk about from the high school perspective that very same thing? So what steps do we take to help teach students about the effects of bullying and any work we do in terms of encouraging upstanders?
Yeah, I would definitely say that the advisory period is definitely very instrumental in help teaching students the harmful effects of bullying, harassment, any type of conflict resolution. I know I've only been here 2 years, but in my time that I've been here, I've noticed, I feel like a lot of students don't always understand the difference between bullying and conflict. I'll have some students come down and say they're getting bullied when it kind of turns out like they had a disagreement. One friend got mean, and then they feel like they're being bullied. So kind of like the investigation process, I'll talk to both students, but I try to teach them, okay, this might be a conflict between them. How can you approach this person and say, hey, look, that was not cool. I didn't really like how you said that. Can we talk about this as adults? So I think advisory period is something that's definitely best for us to be able to reach out to all the students, 9th through 12th, to kind of help them understand the effects that bullying can really have. And then teaching them to be an upstander. Anytime I get any student that does come and report something, I definitely do try to do like that positive reinforcement, really like pep them up and say that was so great. I know it's really hard to do, especially in high school, because they are like labeled snitches. And I know a lot of students don't like to be known as that, or almost their fear that they're going to get bullied for being the snitch. So I do really like try to appreciate, or let them know that I appreciate that they're able to come forward, tell me what's going on, and really give them that positive reinforcement to being an upstander.
Great. Ms. Turner, anything to add from the middle school level on that topic?
Sure, yeah. So we also do kind of cover a lot of our bullying prevention curriculum in our advisory. But we also, in the beginning of the year, make sure to get into every language arts classroom, and we're introducing ourselves as well as the resources that we are for students when handling this type of situation. So that could be, just encouraging them that they're a part of the middle school family, to report the concerns that they have, going over scenarios of how you can respond, and just really encouraging them to realize the power that they have as students to react to both bullying or just unkind behaviors, or even just concerns about a student's well-being. And that's a really good reminder, I think, in the beginning of the year. And like Ms. Snowden said, just positive reinforcement for the students that come and do the right thing, because that is difficult even in middle school as well. We have a bullying prevention contest also during October, which is pretty cool. It allows students to submit a written or visual entry about either the effects that bullying can have on a student, or the importance of inclusion at our school. And then in our advisory lessons, the lessons are differentiated. So in 6th grade, they're going to focus a lot on kind of what they do at the elementary level, the definition of bullying and how to report and what to do if you are bullying and being an upstander. And then we really push our older students to really focus on their own behaviors, because a lot of students don't identify as a bully. Even if maybe they're frequently being unkind, they don't identify as a bully. So we really push them to really promote that self-awareness and go through these different behaviors and start to promote changing some of those behaviors through self-awareness. So those are just a couple of things that we do.
Great. Thank you. Okay, the next topic that we're going to take a look at, so those are some of the proactive measures. You heard about advisory, you heard about some of the classroom guidance and lessons that are given at each level. We also want to talk about post-incident actions. So there were questions posed in the survey about what happens if there is a founded instance of bullying. What does that look like? What are the consequences? So I'm actually going to direct these questions to Mr. Mydock and Ms. Oliver Eggert. So Mr. Mydock, if you could answer this question, please. Can you describe the types of age-appropriate consequences that are given to students who are found to engage in bullying behaviors?
Yes, thank you. So at the elementary level, if a student has been found to engage in bullying behaviors, we do there are some consequences, but there's also a focus on the teaching and learning aspect of it as well. So the immediate involvement of the parents is key at our level. We typically will have a meeting with parents, the student, the administrators, and our school counselor. At that point, we'll talk about the actions that actually occurred, what we can do to make a plan to prevent those from happening again, and also just to teach them about some of the effects that bullying has on other people at that time. There are also some consequences within the building that can be levied as well. Most of them are based off of the safety and well-being of the victim, in a sense where there could be some potential restrictions within the school, meaning certain loss of privileges, whether it's during some of those unstructured times. There could also be a reflection on their behaviors, so that could be written, or if appropriate, could also be with the victim. And then potential social skills or empathy groups that can be ran through our counseling department.
Great, thank you. How about from the middle school level?
Yeah, so a lot of the same applies. Obviously, number one is trying to educate the students about the impact that they're having in a negative kind of way and to try to improve those behaviors. When we do start talking about consequences, they can range obviously depending upon the severity of the actions and the frequency of them. They can include things like lunch detention, after school detention, timeouts, ISS or OSS, as well as things like social probation, which means they're not participating in after school events. We can do things like, for example, if we have a student who's involved in bullying often during unstructured times like transitions in the hallway, we could do things like having an escort or a delayed release so that they don't have that opportunity in an unstructured environment, to do negative behaviors. But the key, obviously, is educating the students and also involving the parents as well. Parent involvement is a huge plus in helping deter that kind of behavior.
Great, thank you very much for that. The next topic we want to take a look at is the important topic I mentioned in our presentation about cyberbullying. And I think this becomes an issue for us as a school system more in our upper grades, particularly at the high school level. So I'm going to direct this question to Ms. Brunel around cyberbullying. Can you discuss the role of the school when it comes to bullying behaviors that take place electronically through social media or technology?
So that's a very sticky spot to be in. The first thing that we, once we've determined that all students involved are safe, is then we begin an investigation about where did this social media and or electronic bullying take place. Many instances, particularly at the high school level, this is something that takes place on Saturday or Sunday or at 1 o'clock in the morning when they've got nothing better to do and they pick up their phone and they start sending out messages. And so it becomes very difficult for us to figure out what was the true implication on learning in our building, what was the implication on student safety, and then are we really involved or not? And so once we make that determination, technically if it doesn't spill over into school and it didn't happen at school, we advise parents on what their rights are and their processes are outside of the school system. Usually, however, even if it takes place on Saturday, at some point it spills over into our academic day, at which point we address those behaviors, which usually lead back to the social media electronic version of what took place, and then we're kind of going backwards again and informing parents, here's the discipline consequence for what happened today in our building, but here are your rights, et cetera, for what you can do for what happened on Saturday evening. Because we were not in a place to discipline them for what took place on Saturday. We'll take care of what took place during the school day in our building. Unfortunately, by the time students get to the high school, if this has been a something that has occurred previously, we have those records, and so we can kind of, look back at what has occurred as a fifth grader, as an eighth grader, as a ninth grader, and try to look at what has taken place during those times and what consequences were given, what did or did not work. So we have the ability to kind of expand our opportunities there to try to help with the situation. And at the end, then we also work closely with our school resource officer. And the one thing that students, I hope, are starting to realize is that nothing ever really leaves the cyber world, and it's there. And I think my time at the middle school, they thought we were kidding when we said, just because you deleted it doesn't mean we can't get to it. And now I think they've started to realize that. And unfortunately, there are some instances in which legal action is taken, and we try to work closely with the parents involved in helping them with that process, because sometimes it is a very, very touchy situation for a family, because they may be the student that reports someone bullied them, and when the phones are taken and searched, it opens up a whole world that the families didn't know existed, and some things that their children may be involved in that they weren't aware of. And so we work with our counseling department and outside resources to provide as much family help as we can in those instances.
Great, thank you. And as that goes right along with some of my comments during the presentation about the importance of parents being aware of the social media accounts, being aware of what's being posted, being aware of what's on the phone when your child is texting or utilizing those applications. It's a disheartening thing to see, certainly on an increase as an educator, our young people making very poor decisions and putting things out there about themselves or others that they can never take back. And I think that's a new dynamic that we've been struggling with, and we've certainly continued to try to educate students about that very thing, because we certainly want them to have a successful life, and it's going to be very difficult if they make those poor decisions at a young age. So thank you for that insight, Ms. Brunel. Our last topic or area of focus is really the importance of parent partnerships. We know that's why you folks are probably in the audience, is to hear about that. Again, we have sheets in the back of the room that just have some tips for you in regards to cyberbullying in particular. Feel free to take those on your way out. But these questions are really going to be across the group. We'll start first with our administrators. So Mr. Mydock, this question is for you, and from your perspective, how can parents partner with schools to help prevent bullying?
Yes, so from the elementary perspective, first and foremost, I think the word that comes to mind is communication. I would encourage all parents to communicate with their children on a daily basis, just simply asking them about their day. You can sure get a lot of information from that, both positive and potentially negative as well. Stay in contact with teachers. Teachers are the first line of defense there. They have a lot of information on a daily basis on what the kids go through. Feeling comfortable to also speak with counselors or potentially administrators as well if you have a concern. Reinforce it to your child that there are people, there are adults in our schools that care for their children, and that we can help them if they do have an issue in our schools. As well, if you receive calls about your child's behavior, maybe your child has engaged in an activity where they were making fun of another student or being unkind to another student, speak to your child about that and how it can lead to bullying behaviors, and also how it made those other children feel. The Stop It app, how to appropriately use the Stop It app. It is out there at home. It's at our school as well, where our kids can use that and report that. We've talked a lot about that today. Also, the appropriate use of that. And finally, requesting materials. If you need any information about bullying or what we're doing in our schools, knowing that you can request materials or information from our counselors or administrators at any time.
Great, fantastic. Ms. Oliver Eggert, can you just talk maybe specifically at the middle school level, what that might look like?
Sure, and a lot of the information is going to be the same. I think one of the patterns that sometimes we see is that as the students get older and into secondary schools, we sometimes have less parent involvement. And I encourage you highly to continue to be involved in your child's education. Communicate regularly with your child about how their day is and how things are going, as well as being in contact with teachers. Parent portal is a huge device to use to keep track of your child's grades, their attendance, and how they're attending classes and performing in classes is usually an indicator about behaviors in school as well. So I encourage you to definitely utilize Parent Portal. Any conversations that you have with students that kind of increase your concern about things at school, please do reach out. The Stop It app is always available, or you can contact the school's counselors or administrators by phone or by email. We are here and want to support and do care about the success of your child. So communication is everything. So just being involved, asking questions, and communicating is one of the best things you can do for your child.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question is really going to be directed at our school counselors, and it's back to that concept of bullying and conflict. So I'll actually reverse our order here. So Ms. Turner, I'll have you start off from the middle school level. What strategies can parents use to help their child understand the difference between bullying and conflict? And how can parents help their child work through conflict situations?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say as a counselor that the vast majority of the incidents that I'm responding to are resulted in out of conflict, or, like Dr. Purcell said earlier, just maybe an unkind comment, that type of thing, and not bullying. Conflict is a natural part of life. We all still experience it, and it's really, really important that your student develop the skills in order to respond appropriately to conflict. It's difficult to sit in a room and talk to someone that you're upset with. And we really, as counselors, try to make ourselves really available and encourage students to take advantage of the mediations that we offer in our office. So any student can request and say, hey, I'm really, having a hard time with this other student or my friend. We've tried this and this and we can't get past it. Can we come and work it out? And it's a step below discipline, and so it really just gives the students the opportunity to come in and say, look, I made these mistakes and I'm sorry and I want to make a plan to move forward. So as parents, please know that is a resource for your students, and encourage them if they've been trying and it's not working out. And then at home, obviously you problem solve. I would encourage, personally, I see a lot of the issue, especially in middle school, when there's a conflict, is that it's made worse by rumors or the involvement of other students who aren't the two people that are upset with each other. So just encouraging that direct communication with whoever they're upset with. Sometimes that's really hard. And if I think a good way to do that is maybe by phone at home. Definitely not like in the cafeteria with a group of your friends. But also you can come to the counseling office and request that space just to talk. You don't need me in there, that's okay. Both people have agreed to work this out on their own, and we'll give you that safe space to do that. So, setting a good example at home, like I said, we all deal with conflict still, so that's really important that the students see, us using those same skills, and just know that we're here for students at school if what they're trying isn't working.
Ms. Snowden, anything to add from the high school level?
I was going to say, I think you took it. But no, pretty much what Kristen was kind of saying. Definitely, I feel like the more I talk with students, it's mostly about conflict and how they don't understand how to move past it. I definitely have done a lot of mediation things with students, and I feel like that does help. I've noticed with some of the students I've already worked with, when they do come in conflict with somebody else, they're more willing to kind of step away from the situation, figure out what they're feeling, and then go directly towards that person. I definitely do feel like rumors definitely make it worse, so when it blows out of proportion, it is kind of harder to maintain it and control it. Sometimes talking to your kids and just saying, hey, look, if this person said something, maybe you should just go ask them, either call them or kind of step aside away from people to just say, hey, you know, I heard you said this. What did you mean by this? You know, it kind of hurt my feelings, that kind of stuff. Just kind of talking to your student just about that type of stuff, learning to kind of separate it from rumors and all of that. And I definitely would say role model is definitely a big thing. I know students look up to adults. They look up to see how we are acting. So just having that role model of being able to either walk away from a situation and come back and talk, or talking it out, definitely can help a student kind of understand how to go about conflict.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Ayers, anything to add from elementary?
Not a ton. I think really, you know, if your child comes to you and uses the bullying word, to kind of dig a little bit deeper and talk with them about some of the things that we've talked about at the the younger kiddos. We talk about, is it something that happens over and over again? Is it on purpose? Is it something that hurts someone's feelings? And is it something that happened between the same two people? So looking at that versus conflict. I think also talking to them about the fact that conflict can happen with their friends. At that young age, there's kind of this confusion when they start to, you know, not get along with friends or have issues with friends. They think that that's it. And so talking to them about conflict, and like Ms. Turner said, that it's a normal thing that happens, and helping them work through it. I know I work through, we do a lesson, and we talk about STAR, which is stop, think, act, and reflect. And we go through the STAR method, and we, you know, do different role plays so they can really start to look at conflict in a healthy way to resolve it. So that's something we kind of think about and work through all year. So if you have kiddos at the primary school, you can bring that up as well.
Great. Thank you. That actually concludes our questions for this evening. I do want to thank our panel for being here, taking the time out of their schedules to give an insight from their perspective and their particular buildings around that issue, and to talk about some of the things that are happening in terms of bullying awareness. I think we're all in agreement, and we know that this is an important topic. It's one that is not going away, unfortunately, as the world evolves and as technology evolves. So we continue to work diligently to improve. We certainly do not do everything perfect when it comes to helping students manage conflict and bullying, but we are continually learning, looking for more resources, looking at other programs, looking at best practices, not just in our area, but nationwide. And so we will continue those efforts, not just in the month of October, but all year. These are important steps for us, and we'll continue to make strategic steps around the concept, such as implementing the Stop It app as we've done this year, in addition to some of the other activities that you heard about. I will wrap things up here, but I do want to let you know that we will continue these discussions and panel forums throughout the rest of the school year. We have a specific forum that will focus just on social media and cyberbullying as its own entity, because we believe it's that important. That will be coming later on in the school year. But you will continue to get information from us about these opportunities to talk about different things around school safety and climate. It's a priority for us, as I talked about our strategic plan, and it's something we want to make sure we continue to communicate. We also realize that people are busy, and so we will, from this point on, as we did tonight, record these sessions, post them online, make them available on social media, so those who can't be here because of soccer practice or other commitments, we still want to get that information to them. I close with just encouraging encouraging you to do some of the things that our school staff talked about, and that's communication. Communication is critical with this issue and any other issue that involves our children, and we want you to know that if you have specific questions or specific instances or things that are being brought up around the dinner table, we want to know about that. Every single one of these individuals is deeply committed to making sure that your child feels safe and welcome when they walk in those doors, and they're going to hear you out and to try to get to a solution as soon as they possibly can. So please continue to communicate, continue to partner with us and work with us we'll do our very best to make sure that you're informed and have the information you need to be a partner with us. So again, please take a handout, take some to friends. If you need more resources or would like to get some more in-depth information, pacer.org is a fantastic site for you. That will also be posted on our website along with this video. There's lots of information on that site for parents and for kids and for educators to help you with these topics and others. So thank you for your time this evening. Thanks for being here. Thank you to our panel for their time and their insight. And I hope everybody has a great evening. Take care.